Hello and welcome to Read Aloud with Mrs. Matuza. Our first video today is going to be reading the next chapter from Mr. Popper's Penguins. We have a couple special members in the audience. We have a sloth and a little sloth. We also have Manny, the dog. We have a Lily, and we have a crazy Hannah. So, today we're going to read the next chapter of Mr. Popper's Penguins. Now, for those of you who are just joining us and haven't been in my class to read the book, I'll fill you in as to what has happened. So far, we have met a couple characters. The first one is Mr. Popper. Now, this book takes place in about 1938, so this is a long time ago. There were no TVs, there was only the radio, and Mr. Popper was a house painter. He only worked from the spring to the fall because he couldn't paint in the winter. Because it's too cold out, right? And nothing dries and you don't want to have your windows open. He also has a wonderful wife, they call Mrs. Popper, and he has two wonderful little children, Janie and Bill. Now, Mr. Popper loves the Arctic and Antarctic, especially the Antarctic area because he is in love with penguins. So one night he's listening to a radio show and he hears an Admiral Drake say, "Hello, Mr. Popper, look out for a surprise." Well, luckily, Mr. Popper doesn't have to wait too long because a day later, a big box shows up, and you'll never guess what was in the box. A penguin. And he ended up calling the penguin Captain Cook because the penguin made an ook sound. So that's pretty much where we left off. Oh, they decided to let him sleep in the fridge. He also ate their pet goldfish out of the bowl. And that's about where we left off. So now I'm going to give the camera to Abby, who will video. All right, so this chapter is called, you have to turn it, Troubles with a Penguin. All right, so the next day was quite eventful at 432 Proudfoot Avenue. First, there was a serviceman, and then a policeman, and then the trouble about getting a license. Captain Cook was in the children's room watching Janie and Bill put together a jigsaw puzzle on the floor. He was very good about not disturbing the pieces after Bill had spanked him for eating one. But he did not hear the refrigerator serviceman come to the back door. Mrs. Popper had gone to the market for canned shrimps. For the penguins, so that Mr. Popper was alone in the kitchen to explain to the serviceman what he wanted done to the refrigerator. The serviceman put his tool bag down on the kitchen floor, looked around the refrigerator, and then at Mr. Popper, who, to tell you the truth, had not shaved yet and was very untidy. "Mister," he said, "you don't need no ventilating holes in that there door." "Well, it's my icebox, and I want some holes in that door," said Mr. Popper. They argued about it for quite a bit. Mr. Popper knew that to get the serviceman to do what he wanted, all he had to do was to explain that he was going to keep a penguin in the icebox, and that he wanted his penguin to have plenty of fresh air, even though the door was closed at night. He felt a little stubborn about explaining, however. He really didn't want to discuss Captain Cook with this unsympathetic serviceman who was already staring at Mr. Popper as if he thought Mr. Popper was not quite right in the head. That means he thinks he's a little crazy. "Come on, do what I said," said Mr. Popper. "I'm paying you." "With what?" asked the serviceman. Mr. Popper gave him a $5 bill. It made him a little sad to think about how many beans it would have bought for Mrs. Popper and the children. The serviceman examined the bill carefully as he didn't trust Mr. Popper too much, but at last he put it in his pocket, took a drill from his tool bag, and made 5 small holes in a neat pattern on the refrigerator door. "Now, don't get up," Mr. Popper said. "Wait a minute, there's one more thing." "Now what?" said the serviceman. "I suppose now you want me to take the door off its hinges to let in a little more air. Or do you want me to make a nice radio set out of your icebox?" "Oh, don't get funny," said Mr. Popper. "That is no way to talk. Believe it or not, I know what I'm doing. I mean, having you do. I want you to fix an extra handle on the inside of the door so it can be opened from the inside of the box." "That," said the serviceman, "is a fine idea. You want an extra handle on the inside? Sure. And he picked up his tool bag. "Aren't you going to do it for me?" asked Mr. Popper. "Oh, sure, said the serviceman, slowly edging toward the back door. Mr. Popper saw that for all his words of agreement, the serviceman had no intention of putting that handle on. "I thought you were a serviceman," he said. "I am. That's the first sensible thing that you've said." "Well, what kind of serviceman are you if you don't even know how to put an extra handle on the inside of a door?" "Oh, don't I?" Don't think I don't know how. As far as that goes, I've even got a spare handle right here in my bag and plenty of screws. You needn't think that I don't know how to do it if I didn't want to. Mr. Popper silently reached into his pocket and gave the serviceman his last $5 bill. He was pretty sure that Mrs. Popper would be annoyed with him for spending all that money, but it could not be helped. "Mister," said the serviceman, "you win. I'll fix you an extra handle. And while I'm doing it, how about you sit down on that chair over there facing me, where I can keep an eye on you?" "Fair enough," said Mr. Popper, sitting down. The serviceman was still on the floor, putting in the final screws that held the new handle in place, when the penguin came out of the kitchen and on his silent pink feet. Surprised at seeing a strange man sitting on the floor, Captain Cook quietly walked over and began to peck at him cautiously. But the serviceman was even more surprised than Captain Cook. "Oot!" said the penguin, or perhaps it was the serviceman. Mr. Popper was not sure just what had happened when he picked himself up and his chair a moment later. There had been a shower of flying tools, a violent slamming of the door, and the serviceman was gone. These sudden noises, of course, brought the children running to Mr. Popper, and he showed them the refrigerator was now all remodeled for the penguin. He showed Captain Cook, too, by shutting him inside. The penguin at once noticed the shiny new handle and hit it with his beak curiously. The door opened. Captain Cook jumped out. Mr. Popper promptly put Captain Cook back inside and shut the door again, to be sure that the penguin learned his lesson. Before long, Captain Cook became quite skillful at getting in and out, and he was ready to be taught how to get on the inside when the door was shut. By the time the policeman came to the back door, Captain Cook was going in and out of the refrigerator as easily as if he had lived in one his whole life. And here's a picture. All set?
Yeah.
And that's the end of the chapter. We'll see you next time.